Chris, a very good morning to you. Can you give us more detail about what you actually found at the school to label them death traps?
Well, what we found is that many of the schools have been neglected over a period of 20 to 30 years, and that the buildings and the infrastructure has deteriorated, and that many of the schools attempted to do their own maintenance. But the reality is that you can only do maintenance if it is based on expert advice, and expert advice specifically, how to address a specific problem. What we have found is that many of the problems have deteriorated over a period of time to such an extent that people don't really notice it until it reaches that particular stage where if something happens it could be fatal. And what we have also found is that in some schools like Lerona in the northwest province, is that whenever maintenance work is done, that the school is vandalized, and that many of the items that have been erected or just repaired, that they are stolen again.
All right, Chris, are you able to tell us where the majority of these schools are? Are we seeing most of them in outlying areas, and are these also very old schools generally from what you've seen?
From what we have seen is that the majority of the schools are quite old. Remember that the only province where there has been a good school building program has been in Gauteng because of the influx and the urbanization, also in the Western Cape. Those are the two provinces that have been subjected to serious urbanization. The other schools are old schools, and they are anything from 30, 40, and sometimes even 100 years old. So it is a problem, and it's something that needs to be addressed as quickly as possible. But the problem is the question of funding. What we have found is that in the latest education budget, it has only increased by 3%. 30 billion has been set aside for the building of new schools and maintenance work. But if you distribute that, that amount between 25,000 schools, you will find that you only have about an average of 1.2 million rand for the maintenance of a particular school. And that if you speak to engineers, they say that you have to provide for at least 2.5% to 3% per annum of the value of your school buildings. So 1.2 million rand on an average is exactly what that school needs in terms of normal maintenance. And that is where the big problem lies. And then the question, of course, is that expertise. School principals, teachers do not have expert knowledge on what is required in terms of school maintenance.
So just give us some idea, Chris, of these schools that you actually inspected or you found were in this kind of condition, how many of them had actually reported the situation, had reported the problems that they are having, especially when it comes to structural problems, to the Department of Basic Education? And what was the feedback?
Yeah. We have identified 70 schools. Of the 70 schools, approximately 50 to 60 have proper paper trails that they have reported the matter to the various district officers. Those district officers sometimes have responded to that, but in the majority of cases there has been no response. And that is where the problem arises, because in terms of the SA Schools Act, the state is liable for any damages or injuries that may emanate from a particular accident. But the reality is that there's also fiduciary duty on the principal and his school management team, but more specifically on the school governing body. And the school governing body is also, responsible for addressing those issues. They have to establish the paper trail, and they have to make sure that there is a follow-up. And that's what we're going to attempt to do, and that is to discuss the matter with the Department of Education, not the Department of Basic Education, the various provincial departments, because the 9 provincial departments, they are ultimately responsible for the addressing of these problems.
Well, thanks very much. We look forward to some feedback from there to see how far you get. That's the South African Teachers Union CEO, Chris Klopper. He's in Pretoria for us this morning.